Welcome to Maine Voices Live. This time we have Dr. Tim Pieh, who's taking the emergency room on the road. His MD3 program delivers state-of-the-art medical care to central Maine communities when every second counts. Hear how he's changing what emergency medicine looks like in rural areas.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is Sean Sullivan. I'm with the Maine Trust for Local News, which includes the Morning Sentinel. Little business to take care of before we get going. I want to thank tonight's presenting sponsor, Northern Light Mercy Hospital, and supporting sponsors, Fieldings Oil and Dirigo Federal Credit Union. Thanks, of course, to our regional sponsor, Colby College, for hosting us tonight here at the Green Block. This is my first time in this space, and it is awesome. I also want to thank, I know there's a lot of subscribers in here, and I want to thank you for supporting local journalism. It really means a lot, particularly right now. Without further ado, I'm thrilled to introduce tonight's conversation, which will be led by reporter Hannah Kaufman, who covers health, hospitals, and access to care in Western and Central Maine. She is on the first health reporting team at the Maine Trust for Local News, looking at state and federal changes through the eyes of patients. Joining her on stage is our guest of honor, Dr. Timothy Pieh, an emergency medicine physician who treats patients in the emergency departments at the Alfond Center for Health in Augusta and the Thayer campus in Waterville. He also serves as Assistant Medical Director for Emergency Medicine at MaineGeneral Medical Center, focusing on disaster preparedness and relationships with area EMS providers. Please join me in welcoming our host, Hannah, and our featured guest, Dr. Timothy Pieh.
How's everyone doing? Cool. This is a nice, intimate space. We can all look at each other a lot, which is good. So yeah, my name is Hannah. I'm a health reporter at the Morning Sentinel, and I'm very excited to be meeting with Dr. Pieh today. I've spoken to him quite a few times over my year of being here at the Sentinel, and he is a huge resource to Central Maine. And today I think we're also going to get into thinking about some of the problems facing our communities that many of us don't have to think about day to day. When we call 911, who comes? Will our municipality send a medical truck while we wait for Delta Ambulance, the region's medical transport service, which has faced financial difficulties in recent years? Will only Delta come? Will they send a paramedic or an EMT? What if the patient lives somewhere rural? How can we know they'll make it in time? These conversations are happening at a high level every day between our local fire and EMS leaders, Delta officials, and mutual aid partners. And then there's Tim Pieh, who believes that even in a rural, understaffed, and under-resourced area, EMS can still change from the ground up. So starting out, Dr. Pieh, I'd like to ask you about yourself. How'd you get into this work and come to found MD3, a groundbreaking Kennebec County emergency medical program that sends doctors to the scenes of overdoses?
Okay. So I took an EMT class in high school and really loved it. And then went to college. I took a year off from high school between college and kind of chased that EMT interest. Worked for many different rescue agencies, wilderness and ambulance services with Delta back then, a long time ago. United Ambulance in Lewiston. And then that just snowballed and led to finally medical school. And I had, in the period of the snowball, there was an article that came out that showed a physician in Austin, Texas, who was a medical director who had an emergency vehicle that was his. And he was responding to scenes as a physician and helping EMTs and paramedics. And I had no idea that was possible. That was 1997. And I kept that article. And then finally, MD3, 2 years ago, I got to do the same thing. But it took a long time to get there. So that was definitely a motivation to get to med school and then carry me on.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm sure some of you maybe know about MD3. It's really taken off and has a crew of seven physicians who report to overdose scenes and kind of teach first responders real-time lessons while also, helping out on the scene. So, so what do you kind of see right now as the biggest problems that are facing EMS here in Central Maine?
There are a lot of challenges and a pretty stiff headwind to EMS in Central Maine. I think the hardest part is finding enough staff to meet the needs comfortably of what the community has to have. So that need is in many different tiers of the 911 system. So in Rome, where I live, if you call 911, you get an ambulance that starts, that's Delta ambulance. But it's going to take them to come all the way out to Rome, 15 minutes, 20 minutes sometimes if the weather's bad. You need to have someone coming first. So that's your local, non-transporting, mostly volunteer, somewhat paid neighbors that have gotten the training to come and help you. That part is fragile. That's those folks that are willing to do that, get up at 2 a.m., even though they're working tomorrow, and come help a lift assist or help a knee pain or a cardiac arrest. Those numbers are dwindling, so it worries me. It's hard to find enough paramedics to staff when the call is the most urgent. We don't put out enough paramedics to meet the needs, and that need is growing. The finances of how do you pay for an ambulance service to keep it rolling are quite intimidating, just to break even. I could go on and on.
I heard we have all night, right? 1 a.m. everyone. So, yeah, I think a lot of people here in Central Maine were surprised when Delta started charging for transport in 2023. That had been a service that had just been free of cost for decades. Why is transport? Why does it cost money now? And why do those costs keep rising?
Yeah, such a good question. So pre-COVID, Delta Ambulance responded to 20,000 calls a year. So it was one of the busiest services in the state. And you can, if you have that much volume, you can almost pay for all your operating costs. And the reason it's almost is when your insurances that I have pays for the ambulance that I call, they pay for about 75% of the cost for that ambulance to arrive. So there's a gap. And if you are running an ambulance service that has a high enough volume, you can close that gap by repeat calls every day. But if you have an ambulance service like most of the ones in Maine, so about 60% of ambulance agencies in Maine respond to 300 or less calls a year. So they get reimbursed only 300 times that year. And the gap between what it costs for them to be ready 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 a year is about $2,000 a call per year that they have to get subsidized for. They have to come up. We pay taxes. And then as you get higher and higher in volume, that shrinks. If you get to 1,800 calls, it's only about $322 gap per call. So at 20,000, you can imagine the gap is tiny. And what happens is if you start to pull that volume away from the 20,000, the gap widens and you got to find subsidy. Mm-hmm. So for Delta, Waterville, Winslow Fire first pulled away and started transporting. That was a chunk of their volume. And then Waterville Fire, a chunk of their volume. And now they're about 9,000 calls a year. So the math is a widened gap and you have to pay for it. And this is all to break even. There's no profit here, right? So it's a numbers game. And how do you solve that without finally charging a subscription? That was the final straw, and that subscription rises. And that's a simple numbers game. If you looked at pre-COVID, what it costs to buy an ambulance, it's now double. If you looked at pre-COVID, what it costs for an hourly wage for EMTs, paramedics, it's up about 30%. That's a good thing. They are approaching what they should be paid for the work they do. So that expense of increasing the wages in order to compete for paramedics is, in my mind, a little biased, not a bad thing. I think we're finally starting to pay the professionals what they deserve for the work they do. But it's a cost, and all that adds up. And everything, an ambulance is double, but IV catheters, defibrillators, stretchers, everything's going up. So the money adds up.
Yeah. And can you tell me a little bit about the idea of regionalizing an ambulance service and having, instead of these fractured pockets of call volume, having one, regional service that has that call volume to support the cost of running their ambulance.
Yeah, if you can have multiple communities collaborate and gain a level of volume, they can shrink the gap and it costs less. So the challenge, though, just for full disclosure on this, is that when Winslow or Waterville, the reason they have to tackle this question is they're not just dealing as a city with EMS, they are dealing with public safety. So they have to, as town leaders, solve the fire response as well as the EMS. And there's no reimbursement for fire response, and it's very expensive. So what they're tackling is, if they can create a system that has a single employee professional that does dual roles, then they get a 2-for-1, right? And they access a way to bring money in through your insurance, my insurance, to help pay for all of it. So it's not as simple as pulling volume out and we lose something. They gain, right? They now can help pay for public services that are necessary. But as it happens, we see the ripple, right? And the ripple happens to hurt the most at a town that they're not responsible for, or citizens, which is Rome, Belgrade, Smithfield. Now, that's where tiny towns where I live, 1,000 people, we're never going to be able to pay for these. So we rely on, and every time that those numbers drop, we have to pay more. So it's a hard community versus individual. And what's home? Is home Waterville or is home Kennebec County, right? And it's complicated. Challenging.
Yes, that is a word for it. And it's been interesting for me. Starting in this role, I wrote a lot about fires that were happening. Started as a general assignment reporter, and we would talk about a structure fire happened here, and this is who responded. And a lot of times it would be like 9 municipalities. And I was always really surprised. I just was really impressed with kind of the web of mutual aid here. But it seems like it gets a bit more complicated when it comes to EMS, just because, there's just kind of different costs associated with it. And paramedics are so scarce versus maybe, fire, at least kind of the volunteerism maybe still exists or maybe is.
Thankfully it does. It's just fading.
Yeah.
People have to work more than one job just to make ends meet, and time to serve their community as a volunteer, they don't have as much time, right? So it's less and less and less. But bringing up the fire, if you look at our fire colleagues, they know how to collaborate. And they quietly do it. So when you see these news articles where 9 communities respond to a structure fire in Smithfield or Waterville or anywhere, what's happening is they've already worked out a reactive collaboration. It's automatic. So a legitimate structure fire, they already know the 5 communities that immediately get paged together. And not only that, the chiefs page themselves. And so all the different chiefs are welcome to come to that scene. They huddle, they collaborate. The chief that owns the town, they're running the show, but their partners that have same responsibility in their own towns come in and help. Do you want me to handle water supply? Do you want me to handle, the rescue team in case somebody gets hurt inside? They'll all help each other out. It's very well done. It's been years in the making. They work tremendously well together. It's sort of this sub-community wants a 911 call. We all work incredibly well together, but it's very reactive. It is pre-planned. EMS is harder in that it's a lot more logistics of that collaboration. It's easy to say, a lot harder for town leaders to try to figure out how to do the finances together, the staffing together. You have fire unions that come in that can complicate things because they're advocating for themselves, getting that 30% increase that they deserve. There's a lot that would have to happen to get personalities that conflict. History, these are small towns, tiny thing happens 10 years ago, it's not forgotten in Maine. That collaboration between chiefs, towns, these are big hiccups that we have to get through. But I do have a lot of faith. We are beginning to see that it's now more involvement from the town leaders, the council members, the town managers challenging these dogma ways we've done it and saying, can we do this differently? What if we came together in this way? Or can we collaborate in a way where we're saving money for the taxpayer? That, I think, is the future. It adds new politics too, but I think it is the future.
Yeah, right. I mean, you've worn one badge for so long, and your fire trucks are this color. And how could we, have a fire truck that is two colors? You couldn't. You couldn't. It would be strange. But
or the solution. Who knows?
yeah. So speaking of council members, which I do see some here tonight. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I know that obviously we've spoken about Winslow and Waterville going off on their own, and Fairfield Benton is kind of considering what it would look like to go on its own for transport. And what are, I mean, you've touched on this, but the pros and cons of going on your own, and why does a municipality want to go on its own?
Well, if you look at, they have to staff a fire department. They have full-time staffing. They are the busiest first responder EMS agency in the state. Before them, it was Waterville and Winslow were the busiest, right? So it's come down. Those three were, and they have to supply that fully staffed, multiple members, 24/7 with no income. There's no reimbursement. You don't get paid to go on a fire. So if you're responsible for balancing a budget, protecting fixed income, majority of your taxpayers cannot give more, it's you have to look at it. This is a way, if you start transporting, you can get that reimbursement. Even if it's a gap, there's an opportunity to bring funds into your town. So you're obligated to look at that. There is a tremendous complexity to move from not transporting to transporting, just the clinical medicine of doing it. You have to be able to supply paramedics. You have to hire paramedics. You have to have a paramedic. Even if you hired, for them, it's 3 shifts. If you hired 3 paramedics, you could pretty much cover, not 100%. You're still going to be relying on mutual aid, but what if they go on vacation? What if they get hurt? What if they leave, right? You have to have a depth. And the real problem is that we can graduate about 75 to 80 paramedics a year in Maine, and we can't do more. And the limit is not investment of money, or it's actually their clinical rotations in other EMS agencies with seasoned paramedics mentoring them, or in the hospital or in the ED with me and all of my colleagues. There's only so many spots in Maine where they can have that part of the training that's critical, and it's limited. So we can't do more. And locally, I graduate 16 paramedics on average from Kennebec County Community College. They all, almost to 100%, already have it. They're set from a job they already have. There's no new medics coming out. So as you start transporting on your own, and they're obligated to look at it as a town leader, but from a system perspective, they're going to take paramedics and lock them into this Fairfield Benton duty. And if they're there, that's their primary duty, versus they're going to come from somewhere because they're not growing anywhere else. And at some point, that drip faucet of paramedics is done, and we can't get more. And then what do? We have them isolated in Winslow, isolated in Waterville, isolated in Fairfield Benton, and we have not created the system where they can move, right? And where they're needed. We have mutual aid, so there are ways to counterpoint that and say, well, we can call for mutual aid. But then it's reactionary again. It's not proactive. If you could imagine taking those paramedics, decoupling them, moving them in a non-denominational way, well, now you're using your resources a little more creatively. And what if you geolocated them, right? Or you could then say, this horrible call, who's the closest? Who cares if it's Winslow orange or Delta white or Waterville red? I don't care. If it's Rome, send me any color ambulance. I just want a paramedic, right?
Yeah, right.
I really don't care. But you also have to make sure that paramedic is so well supported that they're comfortable doing the job, right? They've been onboarded, mentored beyond just graduating, that they have a quality assurance support system. So as they're learning, they get educated. They have good education, right? Ongoing, so that you're feeding them, continuing to grow them. Because medicine is not just go to school and now you're ready to go. That's not how med school works. You do 4 years of med school, 3 years of residency, with a attending over your shoulder the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Same for paramedics. They do a year of training. Ideally, they need a residency equivalent, an onboarding process to make sure that they are fully supported, fully grown, fully comfortable doing the care they need to. So once we start decoupling, because it makes financial sense, system building sense, we're really tying our hands. We're starting to fragment this system. We're not using the resource well enough. But the complexity of getting it to a better system is hard. How do you, yeah. And so you could look at this and say, we were regionalized pre-COVID, 20,000 visits a year, financially stable, moving paramedics as needed in that regional service. And then it's de-regionalized and we're isolating folks. And it's a challenge. I can understand how it happened, why it happened, the decision-making, but the impact is hard if you're just taking care of your own silo of your own town. If that's home and how you're making your decisions, you're limiting, because I don't just live in Rome. I drive through all these towns, so my sort of, need for 911 could happen in any town. So I think it's better for all of us as we think about this in a regional way. How we get there is a active project. Conversations like this.
Yes, thank you.
This is cute.
So I'm curious, did so many people just get burnt out over COVID, or did everyone just kind of stockpile resources and kept, what happened to de-regionalize us?
Oh, I don't think COVID de-regionalized us. I think town leaders in those towns had COVID was a huge financial stress for everyone. I think that's some of it, but they needed to solve a public safety problem. And I get it. I think that was understandable. I think the ripple effects as it happens, and maybe happens again, leaves other parts of our county towns in a real dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think it's good for the global broader, but yeah.
So you started to talk a bit about the different ways that we can be creative with paramedics. You've spoken to me a bit about paramedic fly cars, slow roll. Can you tell people here kind of what that would look like? I think it's a cool way to look at it.
So if you look at your 911 calls, the way we categorize how severe the call is, the most severe needs a paramedic. The least severe, an EMT is perfectly qualified to do it. If you can, and it's all based on when you call 911 and they ask you all these annoying questions to get through, just want an ambulance, right? And they're asking you these questions. What they're doing is they're triaging and grading how bad your situation is. And then we can take that information from the 911 call. It comes out over the radio as echo level 291 or some number that helps us. We have all these protocols that say, if it's echo, that is the most severe. Paramedic has to go immediately. If it's alpha, that's a knee pain for 3 weeks. Like, why did you call that? I don't want a paramedic going to that because they are stuck with that. They are caring deeply for that patient. And they are bringing that patient with all of their skill sets all the way to me in the emergency department. But they are unavailable to the next echo call. So if you can get creative with both system design, flexibility, deroute the paramedics from their siloed town of responsibility, also decouple them from the ambulance. So put them in a separate vehicle. The ambulance has an EMT, advanced EMT. They go to the call. The paramedic may go automatically, or sometimes that alpha knee pain is a lot more, right? And maybe they answered the questions wrong. If you could take that paramedic, leave them available for an echo level call, and maybe they slow roll up to Rome, just kind of driving normally. They're shifting themselves over. The knee pain's just a knee pain. They still are available for a more severe call. Now you're utilizing that really precious resource. And if you looked at the numbers, you only need to send a paramedic about 25% of the time. 75% of the time can be the other team. Mm-hmm. But it works really well it's been well written, well researched in Boston, in other cities where it's just so small of an area. If you get it wrong, you can get a paramedic there quick. If you're going from a launch in Waterville to Smithfield, that's, if you get it wrong, that paramedic is way behind on that patient's needs. So it's much more complicated to work this out. But if you've read the paper recently, you can see Delta playing with this, right? So they're decoupling now. They're challenged by, are they permitted or are they licensed, which means are they obligated to send a paramedic every time, or can they do it only when they think they need it? There's a lot of politics and a lot of complexity to that. But what you see them is experimenting with this to use their paramedic resource the best they can. And you've seen a lot of that innovation. Waterville and Delta did dual staffing for a period of time where they had Waterville firefighter EMT in an ambulance and a Delta employee, and they're both in this Waterville ambulance working the same shift from different companies. Like, that's innovative, right? And the finances didn't quite work out right, but all that kind of fits and starts, creative experimentation, and then study it, break it down. If it failed financially, can we fix that? Can we figure out ways to subsidize that innovation? Because it's a much better use of this limited resource in a rural area where the stakes are much higher. So we'll see. We'll see how it works with this new experiment of fly cars, mostly fly cars, and then and it won't go perfect, right? The point is you need to innovate. You need to then study it, find where it didn't go perfectly, adjust it, sometimes sunset it if it really doesn't go well. But you want to have that innovation. We all want that innovation to figure out what's the right fix.
Yeah, and I mean, it is exciting that Delta has played with it, because I think, and so they had applied to have a license instead of having a paramedic required. It was an up to paramedic so that they could send advanced EMTs or basic EMTs to calls with Dr. Pieh's knee pain. But they ended up retracting the license application. And I think a lot of that is maybe perception or, precedent. So it is exciting that, I mean, at least these solutions are being considered, and that even if they're being rolled through in a different way than kind of expected, I think it's good to hear that, our rural health leaders are trying this. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about something that kind of fascinates me about healthcare here in Maine, and maybe healthcare everywhere, but obviously here, a lot of our services are very reactionary. Ambulances are very reactionary. Urgent care here is bustling in Waterville, but primary care has seen cuts. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about community paramedicine, or the idea of being able to kind of do some of the work ahead of time so that people don't have to call 911 in the first place. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how you as a first responder or an EMS leader can kind of be there for the community ahead of time?
So the idea of community paramedicine is, especially in a rural state, if 60% of our EMS agencies are only doing 300 calls, that's one call a day, right? There's a lot of downtime on that, ready to go at any time. And you have this precious paramedic that is not taking care of people until they're needed. They're just not needed that often in rural Maine, north of here. Even here, if you could capture that skill set and then link it with primary care. So primary care office has a patient that's homebound, can't get into the clinic, or maybe someone just doesn't have a ride, or take your pick, and you really have a need. You have an assessment need of that patient. Maybe you need a blood draw or an EKG. Why not capture this skill set that's waiting, that's not on a call, and send them? And go to the home and knock on the door, and they can come in. They can do all of their scope of practice, which for a paramedic is quite wide. And now your primary care team is now extending their reach instead of a rigid bring the patients into their office. And some can go and do a home visit, and but sometimes that's just not possible for the primary care team, right? So if they can extend it through a paramedic and use this resource, the sky's the limit, right? You can really start to flex this. If you're looking at the unhoused population in Waterville and Augusta, you can send a community paramedic team like Waterville Fire does, like Portland Fire does, and you can now bring them before a 911 call, check in with these patients that are not maybe connected at all with the healthcare system, have no PCP, life's too chaotic, don't want to come to the ED because we're not always very nice. And you can have this paramedic asset reach out and proactively check in. And there's a host. You can bridge people into substance use treatment that maybe doesn't have it yet, wound care. I mean, it's all, if you take your most vulnerable population, they're the ones that aren't connected, aren't housed, and you take a 911 system that is reaching out and can come to them, not for the 911 call. It also works really well to heal. So a lot of us in EMS it's a hard job. You see a lot of horrible things. And over a career, this adds up. It's just a tremendous stress doing emergency medicine. And there's also hard, because I joke about the knee pain, but for a rigorously trained paramedic, and they have to do these calls that just don't fit their scope, it wears on them, especially when it's over and over and over. And they're not always treated well, right? You flip the script on this, send them on their terms out to this population where now they're owning the care. They're taking care in a much more healing. Both the patients love it. The paramedics, it just changes their interaction with these folks. Instead of a reversal of a drug overdose with somebody that comes out agitated and violent, now they're saying, hey, can I talk to you again about getting help for this, right? It's a therapeutic turnaround for folks that really need some. And it's also, it just brightens medicine again for them. So there's so many wins to this community medicine, paramedicine idea. It's just paying for it.
Yeah.
So it all comes down to, how do you pay for it? Because we're locked into this reimbursement that we talk about that led to the gap. You only get reimbursed in EMS if you transport the patient to the hospital. Mm-hmm. How crazy is that? And you're only allowed to transport them to the emergency department. What is the most expensive way to treat knee pain? It's like, come see me, right? I will rock that charge up. Just everything about the emergency department is horribly expensive. So why did we build it this way? Mm-hmm. And then if you looked at all the 911 calls, 25% of those calls never transport. But you still have the cost of being ready to go. I mean, it's so upside down that how do we fix it, right? And how do you fix the financial part of it? The community paramedicine, you could cut off the need to come to the ER. You could link people to a much more efficient primary care system, substance use disorder treatment. All of this, you could use it. You just have to pay for it. Like you have to pay the paramedic what they deserve to be there. You have to allow the agency to have the funds to staff the extra person. And we don't. Our insurance companies don't pay for that. Yeah. Doesn't make sense to invest in prophylaxis instead of pay for a reaction. But we don't figure that out.
Yeah. And like you said, you only get paid when you transport, and then maybe a strategy is, we can transport people inter-facility. We can, make money transporting people, but then you start getting out of your community because you're transporting people from facility to facility, which there have been some, changes to trauma centers here in central and western Maine. And will there need to be more transports to Bangor, to Portland? So it's, especially when these people are firefighters and EMTs, how do we keep them at home if there's a fire call or an emergency at home?
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
The dual role is fantastic as long as you stay close to home. Mm-hmm. But you and I, home may not fix our problem. We may need to get to Portland. So you have to have a mechanism within this to move me when I need it, my massive heart attack. I need to get down to the Portland interventional cardiologist. But if you have this dual role and you're fixed in that thinking that it's just that fix, you're not serving your patients well enough. But you, as town leaders, you have to fix everything for your town. I mean, it's so unfair. We give you the responsibility of doing this 911 public safety fix, but how do you know how to do that, right? Like, you just signed up to serve your community, right? Volunteer your time at town council meeting and try to fix everything. So we need to support them. We need to give them enough help, these conversations. This is all part of it. Enough expert resources, right? So when they're ready to make these tough decisions, we can give them all the data, all the education, everything we can to make that decision as well informed as possible.
Mm-hmm. Where are we at with time? That was great. Okay, I'll have one more question for you, and then you guys have some questions? I saw a very hard-hitting one about what Dr. Pieh's favorite color is, so I can't wait to get to that. Who submitted that?
Yeah, who has that? I want to know. I need a name.
So what is it?
Blue.
Me
I
too.
almost said blue and yellow, but I didn't know.
Duke blue, Tar Heel blue.
Oh, tough. Hannah went to UNC.
He went to Duke.
We're trying to stay friends.
We sit next to each other, and that's all. Okay, so last question for you. So kind of what you were just talking about with community paramedicine can act as a bridge for paramedics to be able to understand the community's needs ahead of a 911 call. And then also, if that person does need to call 911, then you know this person and you understand your community members. And then for MD3, you're going to calls and you are also trying to bridge people, after reversing an overdose. And I think kind of your point about teaching and bridging feel really similar, like bridging people into follow-up care when you have them in front of you, and then teaching the young generation of first responders in real time, just kind of capitalizing. I guess my question for you is about how more health workers can leverage those moments, like those information in those moments to kind of do what you're doing, because I think it's very exciting what you're doing. And you've spoken to me about the ripple effect. If you teach one first responder this lesson in this moment, how many other people does that benefit? So I guess, how do you think other people can replicate?
Oh, I think absolutely. I mean, for us, if we respond as an emergency physician in the fly car to a scene, it's just the idea of, it's not your role, yes, is to help that paramedic of that EMT treat that patient. And you can help guide the care through them ideally, right? So you just a little nudge, right? You may want to do this slightly differently, or sit back and watch if it's going well. But if you can teach, if you do need to help or do something different, and then afterwards huddle and really talk it through, like, why did I speak up, or why did I change that decision, or why did I change the medicine you wanted to give? It's good for the patient that you're there and you make sure it goes well, but it's far better to make sure that experience is an understanding of growth, an exciting, appreciated interaction with us as physicians, or anybody that's interacting with EMS. It ends up, they just don't get enough teaching, right? It's so quick that they go through, and the responsibility that they have is crazy. Mm-hmm. And they pull it off well. We have protocols, we have support, but Maine is not the most well-resourced area. We just don't have as much funds to do this. Our quality assurance is spotty. Our education, we try so hard that we have, but it just doesn't reach enough. But if you can take them that moment when they are taking care of a patient, after we call it a hot wash, we gather together in the lawn of your home after the call, and we just huddle by the ambulance or the rescue truck or our own vehicles. We just talk it through. Mm-hmm. Hey, can I just debrief this? What went well? This went well. Can I offer a couple things? When you're injecting that Narcan, just point it to the back of the head, not straight up. You're going to get much more of that drug into the system, right? That's why I did a little adjustment of your hand, right? Is that cool, right? And then they take that away as long as it's positive and constructive and not stressful and not judgy or embarrassing. As long as it's constructive, that's a lesson that's forever. Like, I remember getting those lessons. They're permanent, right? And they happened in the time that I was taking care of somebody. So we try to do that as often and repetitively, because MD3, we're available 20% of the time as doctors. It's cool we come, but there's 80% of the time where we're staffing the ER. We're recovering from an overnight shift, from an ER shift. Like, we're just not available all the time. But if we teach, it just amplifies. Mm-hmm. And we try to do case reviews. So a lot of the education we do, like in a group like this with EMTs, is take the case that happened, best cases from the last month, break them down, look at how it was documented. They pick it apart and they'll say, this didn't go well. I'm like, exactly, right? That's why we're talking about it, right? Or this went incredibly well. Let's all do it this way, right? All of that, I think, is infectious education. So the more we do that, the broader the impact, I think. And any of us that can teach us is the way we do it.
Very cool. Thank you so much. Is there either anything I didn't ask you that you want to add kind of in this vein of conversation, or we can turn it over to the audience?
No, I don't think so. I'm right here for the talk.
You can put your hand up. I'll come to you.
But thank you.
Of course.
My name is Elaine Coleman. I wanted to ask what populations benefit the most from this model of care, and then how would you be able to measure
For which,
them? For like the community paramedicine,
Yeah.
you'd be able to-
good question. So I think it's always the most vulnerable that has the best impact, or the most, the highest impact, I think. The closer you are to disaster, like any intervention is helpful, right? So unhoused substance use, I think and I look at it purely as a mortality. Like their risk of death is as higher than even my multi-problem list, elderly, right? These mostly young folks are so close to death so often. And I think it's just you could calculate the mortality up, right? If you can intervene, and it's not easy, but this is a hard to capture, hard to find. Usually on a 911 call, all of us are the last people. I mean, if you've had an overdose and now you're unresponsive and not breathing, somebody reverses that, you are now in a complete reversal, which is, in my right or wrong understanding, once you're in the throes of substance use, it's not chasing a high, it's avoiding that. That's the desperate space, is full withdrawal. And so you just put them into it. And now we're going to, can I find you a doctor? It's an awful space. But if we could leverage community paramedicine to follow up with them, right? To go find them later and work on the bridge, right? Try to figure out, like, how do I get them to a place? And sometimes it's in the ER, we see it. It's just, it's offering. You just don't know. Is it going to be the 50th offer that is the right day, the right time? How strong are your bridges once they engage? Can you get them in, right? Can you capture the moment? Do you have resources? All of that is the real, I think, and how do you measure it was your great question. If you can't measure it, you can't make an argument for funding, right? So, I think right now for MD3, we're kind of at this needs assessment stage where I don't know yet, right? I don't know how many people really don't have access. How many people could get in at the point of that when we identify them at the overdose? I worry about them. If they just need the bridge, then it's easy. But I don't know yet. I don't know how many. I don't know yet. Is it just that I need to hand them a home induction pile of Suboxone and they can just dose themselves, and then I bridge them to a refill and therapy, or is it that they don't want Suboxone, right? And so that all of that is kind of to be determined. And I think part of us on MD3 on this is going to be, we're really good bridges. I mean, we can start care right there. There's no scope of practice problems. And we also have 1 foot in the field and 1 foot in the hospital, and then an arm at primary care. Mm-hmm. So we can navigate all that really well once we do an accurate needs assessment of the patient, right? So it's going to be very individual as we go forward. But the measurement is always a challenge. What if we get them into treatment? And what if they stay into treatment? Then what's that worth? Are you going to measure that as a widget, or is that actually a life saved, right? And then once you get into the life saved part, one's fine by me, right? It's kind of like, what's that word, right? So I think that's but I am just like you are. I got to measure it, right? If I don't measure this, it's just a neat talking point, right? So to be determined. They're going to make me report it out, though. Like, my wonderful grant from Maine Recovery Council comes with a lot of reports, right? So, as it should, right? If they're going to give me $234,000, right? I have to, I got to honor that, right? So, yeah, check with me in a month or so.
And I will say, just another kind of exciting thing is Maine is rolling out formal community paramedicine licensing. One of the first states to do that, which is really cool. That's, Maine EMS, it's still in the works about where that training is going to happen and kind of figuring out the details, but soon community paramedics will be able to get licensed at that level. And it's already happening in Waterville, Portland, Thompson. So it is something that has been kind of replicated around Maine. So measuring it is a whole other question, but I mean, at least, we have support for it here.
Maine punches heavy sometimes. Like that idea of having stages of community paramedics that are certified, it's a license level, that structure will be replicated across the country. It'll be once we get it done, it'll be a big, we've done this before. Spinal clearance in Maine was Uncle Peter Goff, right? He's an emergency physician that did a lot of groundbreaking work in Maine that was replicated across the country. The idea that you don't have to, just because you fell doesn't mean you have to be on a horrible backboard for the next half an hour to get to the ER. Like we can teach people to clear all these. Maine does have a strong history of some pretty impressive moments, even though we're not well resourced and we have struggles, but we punched heavy over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
I work within the Maine health system, and I am wondering if there's any thought. So we hear a lot about efficiencies of care and preventing certain encounters with our health system, because certain encounters are more expensive. Has there been any thought of engaging big systems like Northern Light or Maine Health in contributing money to these transportation systems or paramedicine systems to prevent interactions with these rooms that would decrease costs in the emergency room, improve efficiencies, maybe improve quality of life for each physicians because they're not seeing paid?
Yeah. I will say, to Maine Health's credit, they have invested in EMS, but at a different point in the EMS cycle. So they just have launched a significant investment in the interfacility transport. So on the other end. So you definitely needed to come to the emergency department, and that emergency department, for whatever reason, they need pediatric and pulmonary intensive care, right? Like whatever that is, they need to get out of Waterville and get to Maine Med. They've invested in that for all of their satellite hospitals to move them to the mothership in a well-resourced. They've invested in medical direction, ambulances, all the structure of quality assurance and protocols and education. All of that is where they've launched it for now. How to do that on the other end of preventing sort of, it's a hard nut to crack because you don't want to get it wrong. You don't want to inhibit somebody's 911. And then it's really difficult to teach when it's okay to leave somebody home. And we have tried to tackle this. We tried to create protocols for that, but it's actually the hardest thing I do. Like, when is it okay to discharge a patient from the emergency department? It's a lot easier to say, you have a horrible thing and I'm going to save your life. Like, that has protocols and algorithms and education. But for me to say, you don't have that and it's safe for you to go home, and I'm confident with a less than 2% allowed error rate that nothing's going to happen to you, that is incredibly hard. And for that would be, how do you teach that to an EMT and a paramedic, right? When it's incredibly hard for us at the emergency physician level or nurse practitioner or physician's assistant that's doing the same thing. Like, that's really hard, whether that's express care or. So I actually probably wouldn't try to tackle that, to be totally frank. I think I'm just going to take it as they come in until smarter minds come to play. I just wanted the paramedics to cover us in this area first, right? No matter what the 911 costs. But we can resource it so that it's an EMT and an advanced EMT going to that. If we could bring that, what if we could triage it to go to express care instead of the emergency department? And you could tap in to an MD3 model or a EMS physician model where I could work with them with that, because I do know when it's okay to go to one or the other, and tap into that level of training and resource and put me on call, right? And then I could then help them say, this is okay. And we do this in other places. So other countries have a nurse triage that takes an 911 call and decides whether you get an ambulance or not. So it's doable. And it does well. We studied it. So I'm talking myself into a circle. It can be done and it has been done. So maybe we'll steal that wheel, right? Because no better triage than a nurse, right? That's probably better than a doc, right? Probably say, oh no, I can't take the risk. You need to come in as a nurse. I know. So I bet we could. We haven't tackled that just yet.
Can I ask a different kind of question? I think this sort of gathering has an incredible value if we could multiply it so that more people could hear you and Hannah talk about something important. But I think one of the things that we haven't talked much about is the people you deal with as patients have a fear that something is really wrong with them. They wouldn't have called for EMS help, and they want you or an EMT or a paramedic or life flight, somebody to take care of them. And they're scared. And they don't want to compromise and think that somebody in some system has sent me a paramedic or an EMT or a doctor or life flight or something. Somebody's making decisions about me, and I want the best possible thing. I want the top of the list of possibilities to help me. So the patient point of view and this kind of conversation among increasing numbers of people will reassure and reduce that fear. Because I think that fear drives some of what you have to wrestle with as you try to resort and reorganize people.
You gave me a nice segue. Good medicine that we all expect, we call 911, doesn't just happen. You need to assure that it happens every time. You need to educate to it, and then you have to hold it accountable. You have to check on it, right? And so there's this whole other cost of time and support where is your 911 team really quality assured, really educated? Like, what does it mean? What's enough? How do we maintain that every time we call 911, every paramedic and EMT that comes is going to do the best job that you want, right? It's a garden, right? You have to water it, you have to weed it. It doesn't just happen. It takes a lot of time behind the scenes. And that's always the EMS physicians squawk about. I chirp that all the time. You got to have a quality assurance program. You have to look at these. And it's just not a common or yet a norm, right? Their golden example, Lifelight has an incredible quality assurance and education program. Delta has an incredible quality assurance, and many others do as well. But it's hard to do it. It's a lot of investment, a lot of time, and we're just trying to staff the ambulances. So I think that's absolutely critical if your expectations are that you're going to get best practice every time you dial the 3 numbers, right? As opposed to winging it, right? It's just, people don't always like to get feedback. So sometimes it takes a lot of effort to make that a norm and okay and embraced in the culture of an agency. It can be a real struggle. It's not been a norm historically. So yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I feel that this was a really good conversation. I can see everyone's faces really well, and you guys were all looking the whole time, which is cool. So yeah, thank you for saying that. And I do hope to have more conversations with people as smart and engaged as Dr. Pieh here. So thank you all for being here tonight, and appreciate your time.